What's up, guys? Mason the Brock Henderson here, and this is Superman and Lois Season 1, Episode 10, Oh Mother, Where Art Thou? You get it? Oh brother, where art thou? Oh mother, where art thou? Anyways, this season, it keeps going from strength to strength for me. Like, it gets better and better. And I really appreciate it. Because I have been struggling with some of these Arrowverse shows. This one, it feels like the writing is good, the acting is good, the CGI is not phenomenal, not perfect, but it's good. Like it's not cringy to look at. Like I see it, and I'm thinking, okay, I mean, they don't look super real, but they don't look like rubber dolls that you feel like some, I don't know, student in college taking early animation classes. Like honestly, some of the especially Supergirl's by far the worst when it comes to CGI. But this one, it looks professional, it looks clean, it looks well done. It doesn't look perfect, it doesn't look high budget, but it looks like it's done by people who are competent, who know what they're doing. And I really appreciate all of it. And as far as the story is concerned for this episode, I mean, first of all, we've cut out the one thing that was starting to get on my nerves a little bit, the teenage drama. The high school Jordan, Jonathan, and Sarah stuff going on. It's not been terrible. It's just been a little kind of frustrating how it feels like every episode started to get to where, okay, well, somebody gets mad at somebody else, and then by the end of the episode, it all works out okay. We've figured it out. But in between all that, there's all this angst and this pouting and yelling and screaming and all of that stuff. This one, Sarah is dealing with frustration with her mom and her dad. She does leave, which, to be fair, what she's going through is understandable. She doesn't know the whole story. She doesn't see the whole picture. And what she does see, it kind of makes sense why she thinks it's just her dad being a drunk, because he has been for a while now. So I appreciate the fact that you can understand where she's coming from. But then Jonathan finally steps up and says, you know what? All of this stuff is going on. It's not like she can't see that something weird is happening here, so let me just explain what's happening and why it's happening. And I appreciate that. And what I appreciate even more than that is her reaction to it. Because she does see what's going on with her dad. It does take Jonathan and Jordan sort of having to fight their granddad to get in there. And I did like what Jonathan said to him. Basically like, hey, can you just be human for once and stop being a soldier? So after all of that is said and done, though, Jordan does go to talk to her. And instead of her getting all pissed and all mad at, I can't believe you kept that secret from me, blah, 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 blah. Instead of that, which most of the other shows in the Arrowverse definitely would have done, she understands. She gets it. She knows that he couldn't tell her because it's government secrets. Like, that is so refreshing to see a character using their brains and going, you know what, I'm sure you would have told me if you could have, but I understand. I mean, this is something it's way above what we should be involved in at our age. So I get it, and I'm sorry that I've acted like such a jerk. I'm not used to seeing understanding characters in these shows. I'm so used to seeing she would have been pissed at him. He would have been apologizing over and over again. She would have been like, well, just don't know if I can ever trust you again. God, it's so nice. It's so nice to see characters written intelligently and not stupidly just to create conflict. So yeah, all of that was really well done. Morgan Edge, we do get finally his backstory. I can't remember his name. I think it's I want to say Zeta Thor, but that doesn't make any sense. Zeta Core, maybe, possibly. Yeah, learning about his backstory, learning why he hates humans. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I'm not saying it's relatable. Not that I don't sometimes look at humans and go, God, people are idiots. But what I mean by it makes sense is you can look at where he's coming from, you can look at what he's been through, and you can understand why he is the way that he is. And I wouldn't necessarily say he's sympathetic, because clearly he is very power hungry, and while it's hard to say that he's truly evil because he is just trying to start his essentially species back up. There is that feeling of like, okay, but the extent of with which he's going or willing to go to is sort of where you have to go, okay, this is why you're a villain, you know. But at the same time, you can't really say that where he's coming from is super out of left field or not really understandable. It's just because of the idea of life and human life and trying to save people. That's where you kind of have to draw the line and say, okay, nope, you know, I understand where you're coming from. I understand why you hate people, but you can't just go around erasing their consciousness and replacing them with Kryptonian consciousness. That's not okay. But anyways, I really like, you know, seeing him and Cal sort of have that philosophical discussion. Him, honestly, even just the tiny little thing of the first time he addresses him, he talks to him as Kal-El. When he comes through the second time after he sees what he's done to stop his plans, he addresses him as Superman because he realizes, okay, so you've taken on this mantle that the humans have given you. You've chosen their side. You're no longer my brother. You're no longer Kal-El to me. Now you're Superman. You're in my way. I like that. It's subtle. It's not beating you over the head with it. It's a nice little gesture that the people who are not just your average typical CW show watcher, they can use their brains and see. I see the difference there. I see now where he sees his former brother. And it's just a nice moment to see writers who treat their audience as intelligent and not trying to like, let me explain. Okay, he called him Superman here because of this. So yeah, interesting moment, and honestly interesting to see what he's going to do next, because he doesn't seem bothered at all by the end of this that Superman has essentially stopped his plan. You know, it looks like he's gotten rid of all these Kryptonian consciousness that were inside of people, and he has access to the device that is doing it. It feels like his plans are stopped, but yet he still is just like, all right, it's fine, we'll continue on. So I don't know if it's going to be just a backup plan that he has, or if it's going to be a scenario where he has another way of completing this plan that doesn't involve the Eradicator that their mom built. But as far as the mom is concerned, it was interesting to see her. I do wish we maybe got a little bit more time with her, but at the same time, it also is kind of like, but I do like Lana, and I do like her story as well. So I don't mind that she's not out of the picture for a couple episodes while the mom steps into her body. But yeah, some of the back and forth between Cal and his mom, Lois and Cal's mom, they were nice moments and well done as well. As far as Lana and Kyle and Sarah and their whole family drama, it's not the best drama ever, and they're not exactly the most likable characters on the show. But I will say it does. They're all sympathetic in their own way. Like, you do see where they're all coming from. You do understand, like, if you were in their scenarios, why they would feel that way. You know, why they would do what they're doing. So at the end of it all, it wasn't like I was getting really choked up and like, oh my gosh, they're finally reunited. Kyle is himself again. I wasn't getting that emotional about it, but there was kind of a little nice feeling, a little tug on the heartstring in a way, and just that feeling of, oh, okay, you know, I hope they can build off of this, and hopefully Kyle's learned his lesson. Hopefully Lana is able to be there for Sarah more often, and hopefully Sarah sees the plight of what her parents has gone through and is trying to be a bit more understanding that they're both dealing with their own problems. So, but the final thing to talk about is, of course, the title characters, Superman and Lois. Yeah, it makes more and more sense why they called it Superman and Lois. You know, they really have done a good job of giving Lois her time in the spotlight to show why she is just as useful as Superman can be. You know, and why they make such a good partnership. Because while he is clearly more of the brawn, she is more of the brains. Not to say that neither of them can't, you know, do the other. You know, we see Lois at the beginning, she clearly uses her smarts to bring kryptonite and use that to take down Kyle as the Kryptonian. So she can do that, and Superman at the end, he uses his brains to realize, okay, so I'm going to use my power to basically cause the Eradicator to go off again. So they both do the other side, but they typically tend to stay in their own lane while working together. And that is really where I feel like this show has a huge step on shows like Arrow or The Flash, where those two shows have that power couple where you've got obviously Oliver's not super powered, but you've got the hero in Oliver and Barry, and they are married to a female who is not necessarily a superhero, but they are able to hold their own. They're intelligent. Both of those shows, I feel like, went too far in the, hey, women are more powerful than men. And that's where I feel like they kind of lost me a bit. Obviously, this is not me coming at it from the idea of like, oh, yes, women are puny and weak and men are the better gender. Like, that's not, I know people are going to take it that way, unfortunately. But my point is that whenever you look at those two couples where they work the best, and honestly, Oliver and Felicity didn't really work a whole lot because they just were not a good couple for each other. But Barry and Iris, when they worked, it was when they were doing what they're good at. It was when they're successful at their specialty, but they're working together. Barry, he's the Flash. He is good at fighting, speed, all of that stuff. Iris, she's good at seeing the big picture and kind of organizing the team to work together in the best way possible. Those seasons where that was what was going on, it was the team of Iris behind the keyboard, and she's talking to everybody on the comms, and she's organizing everybody and coming up with good ideas on how to stop the bad guys. And then Barry's out in the field with Vibe or Killer Frost or whoever, and he's out there fighting. Those were the best seasons. Eventually, they were like, oh no, Iris, she needs to be out in the field more often, so let's get her out there. Now, let's have an episode where she gets Barry's powers, and she's even better than Barry at using his powers, even though she's only had him a day. That's where you start to lose me. Because that's not Iris' specialty. But you want to try to show that she's better than Barry because women rock and men suck, and that's not, it's not how the world works. I know it's how a lot of people think the world should work. It's not how the world works. Honestly, the best, when women and men are at their best is whenever they're with whoever they're with, and they are bringing the best out of each other. And that's what Superman and Lois have done so well. Like, they show why each of them work as part of the couple. They each have their own individual talents, but they use them in tandem as a team to become the best version of themselves. That is why true relationships, true love and romance, that's when it works. Not Olicity, where Oliver's always wrong and Felicity is always right, and she's always tearing him down and telling him how wrong he is and that he needs to stop being so blah, 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 or whatever. That's not romance. That's not true love. And that's why Olicity is always going to be not the worst, unfortunately, because somehow they found ways to make even worse couples than them. But as far as the main couples are concerned, they're always going to be the worst couple because they're not truly in love. That's not a true romance. It was built on she thought he was hot, he thought she was hot. I think he was more attracted to her personality in some ways, but she never really liked him for him. She always liked him for the abs. Once they actually got into a relationship, she was constantly trying to change him, constantly trying to turn him into the person she wanted him to be. And that's not a relationship. That's not love. So, yeah, I know I rambled on that a little bit, but I just, seeing this show do the romance part of it and the true power couple in a positive and beneficial for both people type of way, it's just so refreshing. I'm not used to seeing that in any of these DC shows. So really glad that they're showing that, and really glad I'm watching the show because this has been a lot of fun to get through. So, but I will see you guys at the next episode. Here we go, in just a minute. And now episode 11, a brief reminiscence in between cataclysmic events. What a title for an episode. But yeah, so this one was pretty interesting because we had gotten some glimpses of Clark and Lois getting to know each other in some of the previous episodes, but this was a really in-depth look into Clark finding the fortress, and then going back to his hometown, and then meeting Lois at the Daily Planet and all of that stuff. And I was kind of wondering why we were doing this, because it did seem very odd that we just had this big climactic battle at the end of the last episode, and then we just suddenly are like, all right, now let's take a break and let's look back and see all of this stuff that we kind of already know, but in greater detail. And there were good scenes, don't get me wrong, but it felt weird that we were doing it. But he was also noticing some weird like shimmering going on, and at first I wasn't sure if this was something that had happened back like in that time, but definitely whenever he flashed from being in the fortress and his father was like, get out, all that, that's when it started to hit me what was going on, that this was not just us reminiscing, it was something that probably I'm just going to call him Morgan Edge for now until I can remember his Kryptonian name. But yeah, something that he was doing, and honestly, I mean, it shows how intimidating a villain he is, that he seizes the opportunity, even though Clark stopped his plan initially. He sees a moment where, okay, well, I know what's going to happen. I know he's going to be out of commission, so I'm going to use this time to essentially search his memories and find his weakness to exploit. And that's exactly what he does. So, what I will say, the only problem that I have with this whole episode, because everything was really well done, no problems. The only issue I have is at the very end, Lois's call. I don't know if they're doing this for dramatic effect or not. It doesn't feel like a Lois line. It does not feel like. I feel honestly, as the moment's happening, whenever Morgan Edge is threatening her and Jonathan and Jordan, and Clark essentially just says, fine, I'll do whatever you want. My thought was, now would be a good time to call John and essentially utilize him and be like, hey, look, so I think the plan is starting, but it's not quite the same as on your Earth. Because on his Earth, I'm pretty sure it was probably just, they took Superman. He wasn't as connected to the human race because he didn't have a Lois in that timeline. And so he was able to be turned a lot easier. And this, they've turned him, but not really. It's not like he's like, oh yes, I believe in everything we're doing now. I wouldn't be surprised if the Superman on John's Earth maybe did fall for it a little bit easier because he didn't have that connection to the human race that Superman does here with Lois. Because, I mean, on that Earth, clearly he and Lois were not a thing. So I feel like this final line, it's meant more for a dramatic, like, oh no, next time on Superman and Lois type of line. And I don't feel like it needed that. I feel like it would have been better if she just called him and basically said, I think we need your help. Because, yeah, they do need his help. Superman can't take on Morgan Edge by himself. He's already seen that. We've already seen that. And he still has one other helper with him, so they're going to need all the help they can get. And I feel like it would be very easy to basically call him in and be like, look, I realize you think that Superman is the problem, but he's not. It's his brother. And his brother is basically threatening me and my sons. And granted, it may not be the best turn of events because, again, finding out that she married Superman and had kids with him might turn him maybe a little bit in the wrong direction, and possibly that jealousy might make him ignore the fact that essentially his family is being threatened. But at the same time, I feel like it's kind of necessary. You know, I feel like it would be very easy for Lois to essentially just point out, look, he's not really turning on us because he doesn't, because he hates humanity or anything along those lines. It's his brother that hates humanity, but his brother is threatening his family, his human family. Like, she doesn't even have to say it's her and her kids. She could say it's maybe some other human family. But I feel like it would be very easy for her to point that out to him. So it's the only problem I have, though, is just one minor nitpick. And who knows, maybe it was just done just because they needed like a powerful closing line. And they're like, yeah, that works. So, you know what, they've done well so far with the writing and the storytelling and all of that. They can have one lazy line that just is there for more for show than actual purpose of giving us exposition and such. So, but anyways, all that being said, another very solid episode, and yeah, I enjoyed a lot of the flashbacks and seeing a bit more about this Superman and Lois and how they became closer. Also, the interview was perfection. So, but yeah, that's it for this one. So, on to the final of these 3 episodes. I'll see you there. And now, episode 12, Through the Valley of Death. It's really weird that 2 of these 3 episodes that I've watched seems to be Morgan Edge attempts to enact his plan. They stop his plan. Like, I don't know. Obviously, there's still something else that Morgan Edge has behind his back ready to use. But I will say I'm a little surprised at how quickly this plan essentially got stopped. Because this did seem like it might stretch out over a couple episodes. Like, excuse me. Essentially, Superman becoming Zod. Now, granted, that would make it a little bit more difficult to handle because, as they did talk about, the longer that they have this Kryptonian consciousness in them, the more likely it is that the full transition will be complete. But because Superman is so strong and because he is fighting back so strongly, I feel like you could have had it where Zod does take control of his body for the time being, but it doesn't mean that Superman is gone. So I feel like they could have gone at least 2 episodes with this because it would have been kind of interesting to see, maybe like they obviously got John involved, seeing him trying to wrestle with the fact that, he finds out about Lois and Superman being an item, finds out they had kids, all of this stuff. I feel like they could have stretched that out a little bit more. But for what it was, I mean, it was still really good and honestly very well handled, in my opinion. I think they did a fantastic job because it's not like John just suddenly heard about Lois, like, oh, yes, he's my husband. Oh, okay, he's your husband? I mean, that's fine. Yeah, no, I won't kill him. Like, he's still clearly... I'm glad they didn't take it like he was super jealous and wanted to kill him route, but he still saw it as, this is a job I've got to do. I have to do this to save this world so it doesn't happen like what happened with my world. So I really appreciate the fact that it was a very difficult moral quandary. They really took their time to show that dilemma in him. And honestly, props to the kid playing Jonathan, because he brings it in the emotional scenes. And this was another powerhouse of performance whenever he was talking to Irons in the tent right before he went to face Superman. I mean, just really brought the emotion, and it got to me. Watching him basically plead for this guy, like, hey, I know you're a father. He's a great father, too. Please don't do this. Like, it was just, the way he delivered it, it was raw, it was emotional, and I loved it. And honestly, even the guy playing John Irons, I mean, you could see the turmoil in him, seeing the son of this guy he's supposed to kill, because he is such a proud father, and he regrets what he lost on his world and his wife and daughter. There's that connection that he really, you could sense it put him in a bit more of a dilemma type of headspace. So yeah, it was a really powerful scene. And honestly, there were several powerful scenes. Whenever Irons and Superman are fighting, and he manages to take him down, and has that moment where he thinks about killing him, and then sees that Superman is wrestling against this consciousness inside of him. He has that moment to decide, and when he does, it was a great scene. It got me a little emotional as well, seeing Superman essentially have that moment of remembering all of the good with his family. And I mean, that is kind of what this whole season has been about. It's been about family. So it makes sense that is what he uses to kind of hold on to keep hold of himself as this other consciousness tries to wrestle for control of his body. It's one of those situations where I've seen it done in other shows and other like video games as well, where you have that moment where it's like, oh yeah, the power of friendship, the power of family. There have been several moments like that come off as very cheesy and like, oh, okay, yeah, but it's all about family. Like, we've seen those cheesy moments done before. I feel like this was a good representation and a very good, I guess, emotional scene that it wasn't super cheesy, it wasn't super overplayed or overdone. It was just a nice moment, and it felt very realistic in the show, obviously, that is not that realistic. So, yeah, very good episode. We'll see what Morgan Edge has planned next. But I'm definitely looking forward to it. This has been a very fun season so far. I guess one final thing to talk about just popped into my mind is I don't remember, what is the last name of Lana and Kyle? I don't remember now. But anyways, that family, we see Lana and Kyle and Sarah all dealing with the repercussions of what basically the townsfolk think of all of them now that Morgan Edge has been shown to not be such a good guy. It's very interesting because obviously all the townspeople are angry at them, but almost a little too angry. I'm not sure if there's going to be something else going on that we're not aware of yet that has kind of almost pushed everybody mentally into a more aggressive state. But it is weird that obviously it's not like they knew Morgan Edge was a bad guy. They just went along with him because what he was trying to bring to the town sounded like a good deal. And from everything he could see, it seemed like a good plan. So it's weird that all of the people of the town seem to be blaming them for what Morgan Edge did. And yes, obviously they were the ones that pushed for Morgan Edge, so they're kind of the scapegoats. And maybe that's kind of the point is, since people can't go after Morgan Edge, they'd rather attack the family that's right there in front of them that's partially responsible for Morgan Edge being able to do this. I don't know, it does seem a little over the top, a little overly harsh for people, but I don't know. It is kind of interesting to see because parallels can be drawn from our real lives, where a lot of people who supported a guy that the media has vilified for the past 8 years and turned him into a terrible, awful, sexist, racist, criminal of a human being, which some people still support him because they see it. It seems like he's just basically being attacked by a bunch of corrupt politicians that don't like what he was trying to do. So there are people that support him and have been vilified by people close to them. And it is kind of interesting to think, like, is that the parallel they're trying to show here? I don't think so, because I mean, we know, media-wise, we know what is the controlling factor. We know what the agenda and the propaganda that's being pushed in a lot of these shows is. So the idea that people in this situation that I've just described are now being represented as kind of the victims in this show, I don't know. It's an interesting parallel. I don't think that's what they're going for, but it is kind of interesting to see how that parallel can be drawn. Now, obviously, the parallel between Edge and the person that in real life that people are supporting, obviously that parallel is a little different. But I don't know. It's just an interesting thought that popped into my mind. But anyways, with all that being said, though, still a good episode, still enjoyable. I liked all of the stuff. Oh, Diggle. I nearly forgot about Diggle showing up. So yeah, I guess there's not really going to be much of a crossover anymore, but I guess Diggle's just going to be the guy that shows up in every CW show now? I don't know. It does raise the question, though, yeah, because it felt like this show is going to be completely different, completely separate from the Arrowverse and all the stuff going on in the Arrowverse, and yet Diggle's here. They're talking about him. They're talking about Lila. So now this officially does connect this show to the Arrowverse, and that does raise the question, if that's the case, why isn't anybody calling Kara in this situation? Like, they keep claiming Superman's the only thing we have to fight against Morgan Edge. There's literally another Kryptonian. Nobody's talking about that Kryptonian. Morgan Edge doesn't even talk about that Kryptonian. So and there have been a lot of Kryptonians. There's a bunch of Kryptonians living on Argo. So I don't know. I feel like they should have just kept it separate based on the story that they're telling right now. It feels like this should be its own thing, separate from Supergirl, The Flash, Arrow, all of that. But bringing Diggle in, that now connects it and now raises a ton of questions as to why they seem to be talking as if these are the last two Kryptonians left. We know that's not the case in the Arrowverse. So it's just a very odd decision, very strange that they're going with this story while still trying to stay connected. It's just, it kind of reminds me of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. At some point, they realized they were not part of the MCU canon anymore, and so they kind of started doing their own thing. That was a bit more separate and a bit more like just trying to tell their own interesting story. And I felt like that was the point where they really hit their stride and had some of their best seasons. I feel like Superman and Lois probably should have done the same thing. Like, we might be in the same universe, we might not, but it certainly sounds like they're in a different universe. But anyways, all that being said, that's it for these 3 episodes. So let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. What were your thoughts on these 3 episodes? Let me know. We can talk about and discuss all that good stuff. Leave a like and subscribe for future Superman and Lois reviews, and I'll see you guys at the last review of this season next time. Peace out.